Engine arm off. 413 is in.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. And step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
"50 years ago today, two Americans fulfilled an audacious promise made in 1961 by President Kennedy, landing a fragile spacecraft called Eagle on Earth's closest celestial neighbor. And today, 50 years later, a multinational trio of space explorers is poised to launch on their own spacecraft to a city in the sky to continue the dream of human exploration of the heavens. Good day from the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, just one floor below the historic Mission Operations Control Room where the epic landing of Apollo 11 occurred 50 years ago today. The symmetry of history brings us here today not only in celebration of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin's landing at Tranquility Base 50 years ago, but to continue that legacy with the launch of 3 new residents to the International Space Station, that launch set to occur less than 56 minutes from now. It is just after sunset at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan on a sweltering day, temperatures just over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, where an American astronaut, a European astronaut, and a Russian cosmonaut are strapped in aboard a Soyuz spacecraft 160 feet atop a Soyuz booster, ready to launch at 11:28 and 20 seconds a.m. Central Time, 9:28 and 20 seconds p.m. in Baikonur. You are looking live at Launch Site 1, Yuri Gagarin's launch pad at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, where human spaceflight began more than 58 years ago. A team of launch controllers is watching over all systems aboard the Soyuz rocket, which is fully fueled and ready for launch. No issues have been tracked throughout the day, which began with fuel and oxidizer loading in the Soyuz booster about 6:28 a.m. Central Time, 4:28 p.m. in Baikonur. Fueling of the Soyuz booster was completed about 2 hours later. Along with the flight control teams around the world supporting the International Space Station program here in Mission Control Houston, a team is watching over the Expedition 60 crew and space station systems, preparing to support the increase in crew size later today from 3 to 6, with the addition of NASA astronaut Drew Morgan, European Space Agency astronaut Luca Parmitano, and Russian cosmonaut and Soyuz commander Alexander Skvortsov. This trio is about to begin a planned 4-orbit, 6-hour flight to the International Space Station, with docking scheduled at 5:51 p.m. Central Time, 6:51 p.m. Eastern Time. Their Soyuz MS-13 spacecraft will be docking later today to the aft port of the Zvezda service module, joining the Soyuz MS-12 spacecraft that is linked to the Rosviet module on the Earth-facing port of the Russian segment. Morgan, Parmitano, and Skvortsov will join the current station residents on board, NASA astronauts Christina Cook and Nick Hague, and Russian cosmonaut and station commander Alexei Ovchinin, who arrived at the station aboard Soyuz MS-12 back on March 15th. Here in Houston, the team in Mission Control will be monitoring today's launch and receiving updates on the flight from their Russian counterparts. Flight Director Mary Lawrence is on console for today's launch, joined by the Capcom or spacecraft communicator, European Space Agency astronaut Andreas Mogensen, who will be talking directly to the station crew throughout the day. During the Soyuz's climb to orbit, tracking and telemetry will be downlinked to ground stations along the flight path and will be routed to the Russian Mission Control Center in the town of Korolyov on the outskirts of Moscow. You're looking at a view of that control room from a balcony camera. And throughout the day, we'll be taking questions from you on social media. If you have Soyuz launch questions you'd like answered during our broadcast, please submit them on Twitter using the hashtag AskNASA.
ready to copy all the parameters, guys. This is Soyuz lead. This is Syoz 1.
With this day of historical significance so much on our minds, it is not lost on the crew members themselves who are set to launch a short time from now. Recently, during pre-launch activities at Red Square in Moscow, NASA's Drew Morgan, who's a colonel in the United States Army, took a moment to reflect on the significance of launching to the International Space Station on this day, the 50th anniversary of the landing of Apollo 11 at Tranquility Base.
I think that it's a huge honor for both my crew, my Soyuz crew, as well as the entire crew of Expedition 60 that will be joining, and for us to be launching as an international crew to the International Space Station. It's just a beautiful way to commemorate that, and for us here in the same year that NASA has laid out this very bold plan to return to the surface of the moon by 2024 as part of the Artemis program. This is just a tremendous honor for us to be participating in this way and to be carrying the torch forward of space exploration and continuing to inspire generations both today and generations in the future.
And for Luca Parmitano, a lieutenant colonel in the Italian Air Force, the Apollo program represented a dream to be fulfilled and the moon as a special destination to visit. Back now with a live view of the Soyuz booster on the launch pad at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, the countdown standing at T-minus 51 minutes and counting before launch. Liftoff again scheduled for 11:28 and 20 seconds a.m. Central Time, 9:28 and 20 seconds p.m. in Baikonur. All of the pre-launch preparations, as we mentioned earlier, have gone by the book. Everything proceeding on track. In about 10 minutes, the retraction of the gantry arms will be completed to expose the Soyuz booster. For the final 45 minutes or so of the countdown, the crew climbed on board the Soyuz less than an hour ago, strapped inside for their ride to orbit, conducted leak checks. The hatch to the Soyuz spacecraft is closed. As we mentioned earlier, Luca Parmitano of the European Space Agency, who is a lieutenant colonel in the Italian Air Force, in pre-launch activities at Red Square in Moscow a few weeks ago, before the crew departed for Baikonur, also offered his views on the significance of launching on this day, the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11's landing on the moon.
I think my generation was affected by the Apollo program, despite the fact that we didn't see it happening. I was born about 6 years after the last moon landing, but it was such a momentous event. It changed humanity forever, that it created what I would call a collective memory. Growing up, I would see it in toys or reports on TV, documentaries. I would hear my parents talk about it, and as a matter of fact, for the first 10 or 12 years of my life, I was convinced that we were still going to the moon. I was not aware of the fact that we had stopped traveling to the moon long before I was born. So it gave me a sense that going to the moon and being an astronaut was something possible, despite the fact that I was born in Sicily, which is the periphery of Europe, far away from anything that is aerospace related. I think it affected me in more ways than I can describe, because it gave me that sense of possibility, which is what I would like to communicate when I talk to students and young kids, that things are possible.
That was Luca Parmitano, who was board engineer number 1, seated in the left seat of the Soyuz MS-13. You see this view of the Launch Site 1, Yuri Gagarin's launch pad, where human spaceflight began 58 years ago, more than 58 years ago, with his launch on April 12th, 1961. Again, just now beginning the retraction of the gantry arms, the service structures that have surrounded the Soyuz spacecraft and its booster since it rolled out to the launch pad back on Thursday. The launch, again, is just 47.5 minutes from now at 11:28 and 20 seconds a.m. Central Time, 12:28 and 20 seconds p.m. Eastern Time. Here in Mission Control, several graphics have been specially prepared for this 50th anniversary of Apollo 11's landing on the moon. On this front screen, you see some of the insignias of the partner agencies of the International Space Station program, the Apollo 11 logo, Apollo 11's 50th anniversary, and the words, "We came in peace for all mankind," the words on the plaque on the leg of the lunar module Eagle that landed at Tranquility Base 50 years ago today. And earlier today, less than an hour ago, the legendary flight director who was on console in the Apollo Mission Operations Control Room, one floor above us, Gene Kranz, visited Flight Director Mary Lawrence and spacecraft communicator Andreas Mogensen on this 50th anniversary of the landing of Eagle at Tranquility Base, accompanied by the Chief Flight Director, Holly Ridings. This truly a moment in history. Kranz wearing his traditional white vest. His call sign was White Flight back during the day, visiting Mary Lawrence, whose call sign is Infinity Flight, on this 50th anniversary of the landing of Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, that occurred at 3:18 p.m. Central Time, 4:18 p.m. Eastern Time, near the crater Moltke at Tranquility Base on the surface of the moon to rewrite humankind history. And now a good view, once again, from our cameras at the launch pad at Site 1 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, as the gantry arms are retracting to expose the Soyuz booster, the FG booster, and the Soyuz MS-13 spacecraft.
We will put Syoz launch escape system in arm. Okay, copy.
And here's a view inside MS-13. At the bottom of your screen is Soyuz Commander Alexander Skvortsov of Roscosmos. To his left, at the top of the screen, is European Space Agency astronaut Luca Parmitano, just out of the field of view. To the right of Skvortsov is NASA astronaut Drew Morgan. Hanging over Skvortsov is a zero-G indicator, a toy duck that Skvortsov has used as a mascot to indicate motion during powered flight, and the absence of gravity once the Soyuz separates from the third stage of its booster into the preliminary orbit for the chase to catch up to the International Space Station, the same mascot that Skvortsov flew on his two previous Soyuz flights. He is about to embark on his third flight into space, Parmitano his second, Drew Morgan making his first flight into space today. We're approaching the 44-minute mark until launch. Again, the countdown proceeding smoothly on a sweltering midsummer night at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, about to begin a mission to increase the crew size from 3 to 6 aboard the International Space Station, as Expedition 60 crew members Christina Cook, Nick Hague, and Alexei Ovchinin, the current station commander, await the arrival of 3 new crewmates later today. The day's activities in Baikonur began several hours ago. The crew was awakened at about 2:28 Central Time, 12:28 p.m. local time in Baikonur, some 9 hours before launch. The crew members then participated in final pre-launch activities that began at their crew quarters. In a time-honored tradition, before departing for the launch pad, the 3 crew members observed the ritual of autographing the doors of the rooms they occupied at the Cosmonaut Hotel in the town of Baikonur.
Control panel info 1 and KSP, right KSP on integrated control panel 2. Copy all.
Is it open? Let us go through.
The crew received a traditional blessing from a Russian Orthodox priest.
God keep you safe.
And then to the traditional music around 5:28 a.m. Central Time, the crew departed the Cosmonaut Hotel and boarded a bus for their 40-minute ride to the Integration and Suit-Up Facility at Building 254 inside the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Again, an extremely hot day, temperatures over the century mark in Baikonur.
Thank you.
A large throng of family members and well-wishers on hand to watch the crew bid farewell as they climbed aboard their bus for the 40-minute ride out to the Cosmodrome and the suit-up facility at Site 254.
Okay, guys. Bye. Good luck. We're with you.
And the crew bus departed for the suit-up facility. Now you're looking inside Site 254 several hours ago as the crew began its suit-up procedures. The Soyuz commander, Alexander Skvortsov, suiting up inside his Sokol launch and entry suit, joined in that activity by Luca Parmitano and Drew Morgan. You'll see in a moment as the suits were pressurized to ensure that they were leak-free, as family members looked on across a protective pane of glass, maintaining quarantine, with the suit-up having been completed about 3.5 hours prior to launch. This is video that was recorded just a few hours ago at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Alexander Skvortsov and Luca Parmitano will be aboard the International Space Station until February 6th next year. A slightly extended stay for Drew Morgan. He will remain on board the International Space Station until April 1st of next year, returning home with Alex Gorpochka and Jessica Meir of NASA, who will be launching on September 25th. You can see a view there of some of the large throng of family members, VIPs, and well-wishers in the suit-up facility, again separated by that protective pane of glass to maintain medical quarantine. Morgan set to begin the first flight for him This will be the second flight into space for Luca Parmitano and the third coming up for Alexander Skvortsov. We'll be talking more about these three crew members just a few moments from now. There you see Drew Morgan settling into what essentially is a replica of the seat that he is now strapped into aboard the Soyuz MS-13 spacecraft as the leak checks were conducted to ensure that his suit is airtight and ready to support the 8-minute 45-second flight to orbit. The countdown, by the way, proceeding on track. Launch schedule less than 36.5 minutes from now.
Well, that is good when there are a lot of people you're happy to see.
And you see Luca Parmitano settling in for his pressurization check of his Sokol launch and entry suit. And there's Drew Morgan as he strode up to the glass to have a chat with his family. Final opportunity to talk to them before heading to the launch pad.
Pass leak check. From where?
The tent.
Oh, for the tent. Looks like the sky is clearing up a little bit. It was kind of cloudy earlier today, but it looks like the sky is getting brighter and brighter.
And Pierre is the only one that I can hear through the glass. You don't need a microphone.
As you can see, the crew in good spirits, very animated as they had this opportunity to share their thoughts about their suit up, the final hours before liftoff.
So they're like size 55 because they go up on top of the spacesuit. And we only use them once. From here to the bus, and from the bus to the rocket, and that's it. The check when we fly, it's like this.
And with their suits leak-free and ready to support launch, the crew then exchanged final thoughts with senior Russian, NASA and European Space Agency managers. One final opportunity to receive expressions of good luck and Godspeed before departing for the launch pad.
Chuck, how are you? Everything is fine. Have a great flight. Have a successful flight. Wishing you that everything goes as planned. I am glad to see you happy, focused, goal-oriented faces. We're confident in your success. All the best.
Luca, you guys look great. We have very warm feelings about you, your mission in this flight. In fact, when you go outside the door, I'm sure you'll feel our warm feelings. Seriously, you guys are well trained. You look very ready to go. We're looking forward to having you up on orbit and accomplishing a great mission. have some fun, and we'll see you back here in the soft landing in the not too distant future. All the best.
We are really looking forward to your mission. It's an impressive mission which you will do with EVAs and all of that stuff. So really we cross our fingers for your flight. Do the best out of it. So Alexander, you are the boss of these three, so please take care of them. And of course the rookie also, all the best for you. So in medium, as an average, all of you have 2 flights already. So you have 2, you have 3, you have 1. So in the medium value is 2 for all of you. Have a nice flight. And Luca, you have already a new name. It's not Luca Parmigiano, but Luna Parmigiano.
Once again, maintaining tradition, the crew members strode out of the Site 254 integration building toward Russian managers to declare one final time that they were ready for launch before boarding their bus. This was at about 8:30 a.m. Central Time for the ride to Launch Pad 1. The drive took about 25 minutes, with an arrival at the pad just before 9 a.m. Central Time.
The crew of the transportation Soyuz vehicle is ready for launch. Phil, good luck, all the best. Please step back away from the bus. Step away from the bus.
This video now showing the crew arriving at Launch Pad 1. At the pad, the crew, you'll see in a moment, climbed a few stairs and waved goodbye to well-wishers, entering the elevator for the ride to the top of the Soyuz rocket to board their capsule, which they've now been aboard for the past 2 hours.
Crew of MS-12 has arrived at the launch pad. Should we take photographs?
And the elevator carrying the crew headed up to the 160-foot level where the crew boarded the Soyuz vehicle. They are strapped in, of course, and ready for launch. Now back with a live view of the Soyuz on the launch pad in Baikonur. The gantry arms have been retracted. We are now coming up on the T-minus 28-minute mark before launch. Liftoff again scheduled for 11:28 and 20 seconds a.m. Central Time, 9:28 and 20 seconds p.m. in Baikonur. 50 years ago, on this day, the world stood still and held its collective breath as NASA rewrote the history books, of course, by landing humans on the moon. That achievement came less than a decade after a call to action by President Kennedy. Join us now as we take a look back at how those words and the efforts that followed inspired and continue to inspire generations of space explorers.
The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not. And it is one of the great adventures of all time. And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? Why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Expedition 12 Commander Bill MacArthur with a greeting for his Expedition 11 counterpart.
Because of your work, because of the ingenuity, dedication, and entrepreneurial spirit reflected in this room and throughout the American space enterprise. Since the end of Apollo 11, we've forged incredible breakthroughs in our technology that have allowed us to go further, more safely in space than ever before. And let me be clear. The first woman and the next man on the moon will both be American astronauts.
Once again, a live view just after sunset of the Soyuz MS-13, an extremely warm night at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in the Central Asian desert. Today's launch marking the first flight into space for NASA's Drew Morgan, the second for Luca Parmitano of the European Space Agency, and the third for Roscosmos cosmonaut and Soyuz MS-13 commander Alexander Skvortsov. With that in mind and a look at the crew, let's take a moment to learn more about Drew Morgan, NASA's next astronaut to fly in space.
I think I often describe myself as a soldier, a physician, and an astronaut. The pursuit of those happened in that order. One of the earliest memories I have is of always wanting to be in the military, of wanting to be a soldier. Quite a history of military service in our family. Both of my grandparents, my father was an Air Force officer, and I also remember my parents telling me a story about my great-uncle Klink, Harry McClintock, who was a paratrooper in World War II. He was in the 101st Airborne Division and jumped at Normandy on D-Day, and then jumped in Operation Market Garden in Holland. And that was the first time I had ever heard of the concept of a paratrooper or what it meant to be an airborne soldier. So when I later decided, I graduated from high school and I went to West Point, I knew that I was very interested in this concept of being an airborne soldier. At West Point, they had a parachute team called the Black Knights. Yeah, so I made the parachute team, and that became one of the central activities of my remaining 3.5 years at West Point. In addition to academics, after class, we jumped most days of the week, but then we were also a demonstration team, so we jumped in football games. Also, while I was a cadet, I went through military basic airborne course, which taught military static line parachuting, specifically the parachute aspect of it. If I go back to the time when I was a cadet, my teammates that I was selected with became my best friends in the world and continue to be to this day. And that camaraderie that we had and that dependency we had on each other, making sure that we were skilled in the aircraft, skilled in the air, our lives depended on each other to do safety checks of each other. That type of camaraderie is something that I feel now in the astronaut corps with my astronaut colleagues as well. I think about how 20 years ago I was developing those skills at an early age and didn't even know it. I'm Andrew Morgan, and I'm a soldier, a physician, and an astronaut.
Born in Morgantown, West Virginia, to a military family, Drew Morgan moved between California, New York, Texas, Great Britain, and Delaware over the course of his childhood. He graduated from high school in Delaware, earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Engineering at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, and then earned a doctorate in medicine from the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences in Bethesda, Maryland. He is an emergency physician in the U.S. Army, with a specialization in primary care sports medicine. He holds ratings as a military flight surgeon and as a special operations diving medical officer. His military career includes service in elite special operations units in Washington and in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Africa. Morgan, along with current station residents Nick Hague and Christina Cook, was selected to become an astronaut as part of NASA's 21st astronaut class, known by the nickname the 8 Balls. Together, they participated in a 2-year highly specialized training program, completing that training in July of 2015. Morgan, Hague, and Cook, along with Luca Parmitano, are all part of what will be the space station's spacewalking teams for the next several months. In fact, if all goes as planned, Morgan will be joining Nick Hague next month to install the next international docking adapter to the Harmony module during a spacewalk, and is slated to join Parmitano for a complex series of spacewalks later this year to repair and refurbish the alpha magnetic spectrometer, which was delivered to the station in 2011. In addition to being an accomplished soldier, physician, and soon-to-be space traveler, there's a lot more to astronaut Drew Morgan. As we head into the final minutes of the launch countdown, let's take a look once again at this unique individual.
The clock has started. Roger.
What's your favorite movie?
Band of Brothers.
Your favorite food?
Anything spicy.
Favorite color?
Olive drab.
Are you a morning person or a night person?
Definitely a morning person. I'm not demonstrating that very well now, but yes, I am a morning person.
What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Mint chocolate chip.
Is there one thing you have in your fridge all the time?
Milk.
What accomplishment are you most proud of?
My kids.
Who's the person who makes you laugh the most?
My wife.
What's your most memorable career moment?
Graduating from Ranger School and being promoted to Major on the same day.
If you could have one superpower only, what would it be?
Time travel.
What's your favorite pizza topping?
Lots and lots of cheese.
Your favorite animal?
Armadillo.
Favorite dance move?
Air guitar.
Who inspires you?
My dad.
What would you like to be remembered for?
Being a good husband and father.
What advice would you give to your younger self?
Be a good team player.
What would be a good theme song for your life?
Live It Well by Switchfoot.
If you could spend one day on Mars, what would you do there for fun?
Take pictures.
What is a life goal you plan to achieve this year?
Come home safely from space.
Born in Paterno, Italy, European Space Agency astronaut Luca Parmitano was a lieutenant colonel in the Italian Air Force. After completing a bachelor's degree in political science at the University of Naples Federico II in 1999, he graduated from the Italian Air Force Academy in 2000. The following year, he completed basic flight training with the U.S. Air Force involved in European NATO joint jet pilot training at Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas. He continued his training, completing coursework in Germany in 2002, in Italy in 2003, in Belgium in 2005, and then completing a master's degree in experimental flight test engineering in July of 2009. Parmitano flew the AMX aircraft with the 13th Group, 32nd Wing in Amendola, Italy, from 2001 to 2007, obtaining all aircraft qualifications during that time. In 2007, he was selected by the Italian Air Force to become a test pilot. He has logged more than 2,000 hours of flight time, He has qualified on more than 20 types of military airplanes and helicopters and has flown over 40 types of aircraft. Selected as an ESA astronaut in 2009, Parmitano was assigned as a flight engineer to the Italian Space Agency's first long-duration mission on the International Space Station, flying in 2013 aboard Soyuz TMA-09M to the station as a member of the Expedition 3637 crew. He took part in a pair of spacewalks, logging a combined total of 7 hours and 39 minutes outside the station. He will take over command of the International Space Station from current commander Alexei Ovchinin in October, becoming the third European astronaut and the first Italian to do so. He is board engineer number 1 for today's launch. To the left of the Soyuz commander, Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Skvortsov, who is returning to space for the third time today. A retired colonel in the Russian Air Force, Skvortsov was born in the Shalkovo-Moscow region in Russia. After graduating from high school and then from the Stavropol Air Force Pilot and Navigator School as pilot engineer, he went on to graduate from the military Red Banner Zhukov Air Defense Academy in 1997 as a navigator and operational tactical fighter defense aviator. He served as a pilot, a senior pilot, and an air flight commander. Skvortsov enlisted into the astronaut and cosmonaut corps of the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center in 1997, becoming a member of the 12th cosmonaut class and becoming a test cosmonaut in November of 1999. Qualified as a cosmonaut instructor, he is qualified as both a diver and a powered paragliding instructor, having performed over 500 jumps. In 2010, he graduated from the Russian Academy of Public Administration with a degree in law. He is a veteran of 2 long-duration space flights, both to the International Space Station. In 2010, he was the commander of Soyuz TMA-18, an Expedition 23 flight engineer, and the station's Expedition 24 commander. His second space flight took place in 2014, once again taking on the role of commander of Soyuz TMA-12M and working aboard the space station as an Expedition 3940 flight engineer. During his mission, he performed 2 spacewalks, accumulating a total of 12 hours and 33 minutes outside the station. As mentioned earlier, he is serving as Soyuz MS-13 commander today and will be a flight engineer during Expeditions 60 and 61. As we celebrate the Apollo 11 anniversary today, as we've mentioned several times earlier in this broadcast, and inspired by the Apollo missions, Drew Morgan described the significance and the symbolism of his crew's Expedition 60 crew patch during a recent crew news conference.
Expedition 60 patch, there are elements of that patch that commemorate the Apollo 11 moon landing. If you are familiar with the Apollo 11 patch, bears some resemblance. Rather than the moon in the foreground, we have the Earth in the foreground and the moon in the background, and the L constellation for the 50 years, and then the Eagle constellation, just like the Eagle on the Apollo 11 patch. So, you know, the patch designers and the crew came together and really thought this was a great idea, and very similar to the Apollo 11 patch. Of course, there are no names represented on this patch, which was an important element for us as well, to really embody that sense that this was an accomplishment of the world and not one single country.
And we're back with our live coverage of the launch of Morgan, Parmitano, and Skvortsov. And, of course, on the launch pad of the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, the Soyuz MS-13 stands on the flood-lit launch pad with liftoff scheduled just under 14 minutes from now. The Soyuz rocket stands 162 feet tall, weighs 680,000 pounds, and consists of the Soyuz MS-13 inside a protective shroud at the top and the 3-stage Soyuz FG booster below. The Soyuz spacecraft that will take our trio of crew members to orbit today was mated to its booster, and the 3 main stages were joined together on Wednesday. Just 24 hours later, on Thursday, the Soyuz rocket began its trek to the launch pad right on time at 7 a.m. Baikonur time, maintaining tradition, arriving less than 2 hours later, where it was raised to its vertical position for final pre-launch preparations. The Soyuz is now, of course, poised for launch with its 3 crew members on board. The Soyuz spacecraft sitting high above the 3 stages of the Soyuz booster, which uses kerosene and liquid oxygen as the propellant. At engine ignition, the Soyuz's engines will come up to flight speed, the launch pad hold-down arms will retract, and the booster rocket will be on its way. The first stage engines and liquid fuel strap-on boosters will burn for about 1 minute 58 seconds as the Soyuz arcs out to the northeast from the Baikonur Cosmodrome on a trajectory designed to catch up to the International Space Station 6 hours later. Just before first stage separation, the vehicle's launch escape tower will be jettisoned, followed seconds later by the jettisoning of the 4 strap-on first stage boosters. About a half-minute later, the clamshell fairing around the upper stage of the booster will separate, exposing the Soyuz MS-13 for the first time as the Soyuz continues its trek uphill. The second stage of the Soyuz rocket will burn until the 4-minute 57-second mark, when the third stage will ignite, a so-called hot stage technique that precedes the separation of the second stage. The third stage will continue to fire until 8 minutes, 45 seconds after launch, when it too will shut down, leading to Soyuz spacecraft separation. That will be followed within seconds by the deployment of the Soyuz MS-13 solar arrays and navigational antennas. At this point, the Soyuz and its 3-man crew will be in its preliminary orbit for the chase to catch up to and dock to the International Space Station. And that Soyuz spacecraft is scheduled to dock to the aft port of the space station's Zvezda service module later today, 4 orbits after launch. Docking is scheduled for 5:51 p.m. Central Time, 6:51 p.m. Eastern Time. Now just 11 minutes until launch. Down at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, a large group of NASA, Russian, and European representatives is at the Cosmodrome, a short distance from the launch pad. And with them, NASA Public Affairs Officer Dan Hewitt, who is there to provide an update on activities there. Dan?
Hello, Rob. Coming to you from a very sweltering Kazakhstan, where temperatures throughout the week's activities have climbed into the triple digits, but haven't dampened the excitement to see this launch one bit. Friends and family from our crew members, along with senior program officials, including NASA International Space Station Program Manager Kirk Shireman, Roscosmos head Dmitry Rogozin, and ESA Director General Jan Werner, are all on location to support the launch of this international crew, taking flight 50 years to the day after Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin put humanity's first footprints on the moon. Morgan, Skortsov, and Parmitano will have no shortage of activities once they arrive, with their expeditions slated to be jam-packed with more than 260 science investigations, a steady stream of visiting spacecraft, and upwards of a dozen spacewalks, including some of the most ambitious forays into the vacuum of space ever conceived that will see Morgan and Parmitano work to extend the life of the alpha magnetic spectrometer, a massive particle physics experiment looking to unlock the secrets behind the origin of our universe. For now, though, I'll send it back to you, Rob, and Mission Control Houston, as we count down to liftoff here in Baikonur.
From descent module ESA on camera.
Back with a live view of the Soyuz on the launch pad, the countdown approaching the T-minus 9-minute mark. Inside the crew cabin, the crew is making final preparations for launch. A good view of Drew Morgan, his face partially obscured by the zero-G mascot that he is batting around in a playful manner. At the lower right-hand corner of your screen is Soyuz Commander Alexander Skvortsov. Just a few minutes ago, the crew completed their final suit leak checks. The testing of the descent module, in which the 3 crew members are strapped inside, is now complete. The spacecraft's gyros are in flight readiness, and flight recorders have now been activated. Just 8.5 minutes away from launch, pre-launch operations nearly complete at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Launch controllers at the blockhouse in Baikonur reporting everything is in readiness for liftoff. At the time of launch, the International Space Station will be flying 254 miles over southern Russia, flying between Kazakhstan and Mongolia, some 646 miles ahead of the Soyuz as it climbs off the launch pad. The Soyuz will be launching into a narrow corridor of just 34.2 degrees, basically the moment where the Earth's rotation carries the Baikonur Cosmodrome into the plane of the station's orbit, very much like driving a car onto an on-ramp of a freeway to expedite the Soyuz's 4-orbit 6-hour trek to catch up to the International Space Station later today. We're now at the 7.5-minute mark before launch. At this point in the countdown, the Soyuz's first and second stage engines have been declared ready for launch. Telemetry being received from the rocket, indicating that all primary and backup systems are set to support liftoff. And a view from the other camera inside of the descent module, Skvortsov at the bottom of your screen. At the top of your screen, European Space Agency astronaut Luca Parmitano, ready to begin his second flight into space. Here in Mission Control in Houston, Flight Director Mary Lawrence has pulled all of her flight controllers. The International Space Station is ready to accept the arrival of the 3 crew members later today. Lawrence on console, joined by European Space Agency astronaut and spacecraft communicator Andreas Mogensen. The feed that you're watching on NASA TV is also being uplinked to the crew on board the International Space Station, now at the T-minus 6.5-minute mark before launch.
Syoz, this is launch late. 1 minute readiness. Everything is nominal. The control is on board, and the launch report will be provided. Copy. All this is just 1. Everything is nominal on board. We are feeling well.
That report through an interpreter, the words of Alexander Skvortsov saying the crew feels well. They are ready for launch. By the way, a launch key has now been inserted in the launch bunker. This is a real key that transitions the launch sequence into its automatic mode. And you're hearing some of the music that is piped in from the blockhouse in Baikonur to relax the crew in the final minutes before liftoff. This is a traditional activity.
Launch key inserted.
Coming up on the 5-minute mark before launch, the blockhouse in Baikonur reporting the range is clear. The Soyuz rocket ready to begin its journey uphill. T-minus 5 minutes and counting. Onboard systems now are being switched to onboard control. The commander's cockpit displays have been activated, and the crew has closed their helmets, putting them on suit oxygen. T-minus 4 minutes, 28 seconds as we speak. The International Space Station now flying directly over the Baikonur Cosmodrome.
Combustion chamber, nitrogen purge.
The fuel lines and other elements of the rocket engines now being purged with nitrogen to fireproof them by removing fuel and oxidizer vapors. Inside 4 minutes before launch, everything proceeding on track. The next major activity will be the drain back of excess propellant to make sure the Soyuz booster is at the proper weight for liftoff.
Ground board measurement system is activated, but on to command. Copy.
Less than 3.5 minutes before launch.
Oxidizer nitrogen to the vehicle is terminated. Everything is well on board. Copy. Utyosi.
T-minus 3 minutes and counting. Just seconds away from the booster's fuel tanks being pressurized for flight. This will optimize the flow of fuel and help to add structural support to the rocket as it sits on the launch pad.
Booster propellant tank pressurization initiated.
Coming up on the T-minus 2-minute mark on the 50th anniversary of humanity's first footsteps on the moon. T-minus 2 minutes and counting. Coming up on the termination of the ground propellant feed. At the 1 minute mark, the vehicle will be placed on internal power. T-minus 90 seconds. The first of 2 ground umbilicals will retract from the side of the vehicle at about the T-minus 35 second mark. That will initiate auto sequence start. T-minus 50 seconds.
Vehicle to internal power, ground propellant feed.
First of the 2 umbilicals now retracting.
We are ready for the launch.
T-minus 30 seconds. The second umbilical now retracting, initiating auto sequence start. We have main engine ignition, engines and turbo pumps up to flight speed. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Engine turbo pump in flight.
And liftoff. 50 years after a small step for man, the Soyuz rocket and its multinational crew take a giant leap off the launch pad, bound for the International Space Station.
15 seconds in flight. All the parameters are nominal.
Good first stage performance. The Soyuz delivering 930,000 pounds of thrust from its 4 boosters and single engine. The nighttime sky is creating a halo-like effect as the Soyuz arcs to the northeast away from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in pursuit of the International Space Station.
Everything is nominal on board. 40 seconds. The spacecraft, the vehicle are nominal and they're stable. Copy.
Good reports from the blockhouse in Baikonur, punching a hole through the clouds overhead. Good engine performance being reported.
60 seconds in. Yaw, pitch, roll are nominal. Copy.
1 minute, 10 seconds into the flight.
Feeling well.
Alexander Skvortsov reports the crew is feeling well. Now going through the period of maximum dynamic pressure, leaving a contrail.
The
Soyuz traveling almost 3,000 miles an hour, 15 miles in altitude, 10 miles downrange from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. One minute, 45 seconds after launch. All structural parameters reported to be in excellent shape. A good view inside MS-13. Alexander Skvortsov at the bottom of your screen. At the top of your screen, Luca Parmitano as we stand by for first stage separation.
Yes, the jettison is confirmed.
First stage separation confirmed.
Confirmed. Third stage separation is confirmed. Affirmative. The vehicle is stable. Copy.
The Soyuz now traveling 4,500 miles an hour, 29 miles in altitude, 29 miles downrange from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. 2.5 minutes into the flight, all structural parameters reported to be in excellent shape. Second stage performance reported nominal. The launch shroud has now been jettisoned, and now we're seeing a view from a camera on the second stage of the Soyuz rocket. We will no longer see in-cabin views. That external camera activated by Alexander Skvortsov from a button on his control panel. But a great view looking down the Soyuz booster. Again, this view from a second stage camera on the Soyuz rocket. 3 minutes, 15 seconds into the flight, everything proceeding normally.
.120 seconds. The second stage engines are operating nominally, and everything is nominal on board. We're feeling well. .220 seconds. The flight is nominal. Copy. Everything is nominal on board.
4 minutes into the flight, almost halfway through powered flight, as the Soyuz MS-13 and its trio of crew continues its flight uphill, and the beginning of a 6-hour journey to the International Space Station. A spectacular view from a second stage camera on the Soyuz booster. The Soyuz traveling 8,500 miles an hour, 91 miles in altitude, 248 miles downrange from the Baikonur Cosmodrome.
Copy. Everything is nominal on board. Second stage separation is confirmed.
And you see the aft skirt from the second stage separating. Second stage separation is complete, continuing to receive downlink video from the Soyuz booster at the 5-minute, 15-second mark into the flight. 3.5 minutes of powered flight remaining. The Soyuz being powered on the singular capability of its third stage engine. All parameters are reported in excellent shape.
Everything is nominal on board. We are feeling well. .330 seconds in, the third stage engines are operating nominally.
The Soyuz now traveling over 10,000 miles an hour, 111 miles in altitude, 417 miles downrange from the Baikonur Cosmodrome.
350 seconds. The flight is nominal.
And by the way, at the time of third stage shutdown and orbital insertion, the ISS will be flying over the far eastern coast of Russia near the Sea of Japan, almost 2,500 statute miles ahead of the Soyuz as it begins its chase to catch up to the station in earnest. 6 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight, 2.5 minutes of powered flight remaining.
.390 seconds. The launch vehicle parameters are nominal. Copy all. Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling well. All the parameters are nominal.
As you can hear, Alexander Skvortsov continuing to provide progress reports to the Launch Control Center in Baikonur. At the time of third stage shutdown and spacecraft separation, control of the Soyuz's flight to the International Space Station will be reverted back to the flight control team at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov on the outskirts of Moscow. 7 minutes, 15 seconds into the flight, the Soyuz traveling 13,200 miles an hour, 124 miles in altitude, 715 miles downrange from the Baikonur Cosmodrome.
440 seconds in, the vehicle is stable. Copy. Everything is nominal here.
Good reports continue to be received back from the blockhouse in Baikonur. Good structural parameters. The third stage engine continues to burn as advertised as we approach the 8-minute mark into the flight.
470 seconds in, third stage engines are operating nominally. Copy all. Everything is nominal on board. We're feeling well. 490 seconds. The vehicle is stable. Copy all. Everything is nominal here. We're feeling well.
8.5 minutes into the flight, about 15 seconds away from third stage shutdown and spacecraft separation.
Your pitch roll are nominal. Copy. We are standing by for KO, and everything is nominal on board.
And we have third stage shutdown and separation.
Third stage separation is confirmed. Congratulations on the nominal orbital insertion. Mission Control Moscow is here. Vyacheslav is here. Congratulations again. Copy all. Thank you very much.
And you can see the Soyuz solar arrays beginning to unfurl as planned.
Mission Control Moscow, how copy? Loud and clear. How us? Loud and clear as well.
And we have confirmation of a perfect solar array deploy. All navigational antennas have also been deployed. A textbook launch for Soyuz MS-13, 3 new space explorers en route to the International Space Station, 50 years to the day that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon.
Okay, we are on page 35, and please perform all those steps. And we are standing by for the readings from the flight engineer for page 36. Moscow, this is Syoz 2. And are you ready to copy the first reading? Yes, we are. SA pressure 798. BO pressure is 813. STL pressure is 844. Copy all. And RDR will need to go through the KRL. Actually, it's complete already. Copy. I'm deactivating KDU pressurization. Copy. Do you want me to give you Form 3 data? Yes, we are ready. 17, decimal 1, 18, 17, 19, 2, 6, 6, 20, 2, decimal 0, 21, 1, decimal 7, 22, 3, 2, 7, 23, 3, 2, 9, 24, 17, decimal 3, 25, 17, decimal 7, 26, 2, 6, 6. The prop is 8, 7 is 8, 7, 8. Copy all. Okay. Course 1 test is underway. Copy. Did you send the command from input 2? Yes, I did send it.
This is Mission Control Houston. You're looking at a view from the balcony camera overlooking the cavernous flight control room at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside Moscow. Drew Morgan, Luca Parmitano, and Alexander Skvortsov well on their way to catch up to the International Space Station after a flawless launch from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Liftoff occurring on time at 11:28 and 20 seconds a.m. Central Time, 12:28 and 20 seconds p.m. Eastern Time, 9:28 and 20 seconds p.m. at the Baikonur Cosmodrome about an hour after sunset. Soyuz MS-13 lifted off perfectly, arced out to the northeast, and began its trek, an 8-minute, 45-second journey to its preliminary orbit. Soyuz is now well on its way to reaching the International Space Station later today. All of its systems in great shape, and Alexander Skvortsov, the Soyuz commander, reporting that his crewmates, Drew Morgan and Luca Parmitano, and himself, all are in excellent shape. So with that, let's take a look ahead at what lies on the horizon for NASA TV programming coming up, Soyuz-related. At 3 p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll have a video file, a post-launch video file that will include all of today's launch activities and post-launch interviews that are being conducted at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Our docking coverage, rendezvous and docking of the Soyuz to the aft port of the Zvezda service module will begin at 5 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. That will lead to a docking at 5:51 p.m. Central Time, 6:51 p.m. Eastern Time. There will be then our hatch opening coverage and the welcoming ceremony that will ensue with congratulatory calls from family and friends in Baikonur. Our hatch opening coverage to begin at 7 p.m. Central Time tonight. Hatch opening planned at 7:50 p.m.
Thank you very much, and my crew members are saying thank you very much. Thank you. We hope everything will go smoothly. We are sure of that. Good luck. Godspeed. Thank you.
You just heard congratulatory words radioed up to Alexander Skvortsov and his crewmates aboard the Soyuz from the chief flight director at the Russian Mission Control Center, Vladimir Solovyev. Skvortsov reporting that the crew is in great shape. The Soyuz on its way with a series of pre-programmed burns over the next several hours on a fast-track 4-orbit rendezvous to reach the International Space Station. With that, we'll wrap up our launch coverage. A perfect launch on this 50th anniversary of the landing of humans on the moon as Soyuz MS-13. Drew Morgan, Luca Parmitano, and Alexander Skvortsov in their preliminary orbit en route to a docking to the International Space Station later today. We'll be back on the air with you at 5 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Time with our rendezvous and docking coverage. In the meantime, from all of us here at NASA on this historic day in human spaceflight history, we wish you all the best on this Saturday. This is Mission Control Houston.